Good morning and welcome to 365 Days of Stories with Theo Mayer, day 57. And I'm continuing the legend of the three beautiful princesses. Now remember, we had left them on the road and the cavalcade that Muhammad was leading, bringing the princesses back to the Alhambra. Well, it came upon this company of soldiers who were leading prisoners back to Granada. And just along the Zenal River is where the cavalcade, with Muhammad at its head, met this group of men. And remember, the soldiers had all dived to the ground, face down to the ground, to obey the orders of the herald. But even though the soldiers commanded their captives to do the same, the three Spanish cavaliers had not done so. Maybe they didn't understand what they were being told to do, but perhaps it was because they wanted to see what this cavalcade was all about. Now, this really got Muhammad going. His ire rose to the point where he jumped off of his horse, pulled out his scimitar, and then came to deal a blow on at least one of the Spanish cavaliers. And his daughters, seeing what was about to happen, leapt off their horses. Even the young Zoraida, who was the most timid of them all, implored her father not to do anything harmful to these Spanish noblemen. Now, just as this was all going on, the captain of the guards rose up off the ground and ran over to Muhammad and said, "Sire, please do not do something that you would regret. For these Spanish cavaliers fought bravely in a battle and were overcome and captured. Know that if you harm them in some way, it could put a blemish on your role as sovereign. And not to mention, imagine the ransom that you could get for these three men." Well, this sort of sealed the fate of the cavaliers. They were going to live, and Muhammad spoke to this and said, "I will let them live, but they will be punished for their audacity. Send them to the Vermilion Tower and have them work hard labor, chipping out stones." So, that being said, you would think that all was well, except for this. Muhammad had basically created another blunder, for this whole interaction took quite a while. And during this whole time, all this was going on, this great commotion, a wind had sprung up. It was right along the river, and if you've spent any time along rivers, because of that open water, it's a great place for the wind to build and just flow right down or up the riverbed, just as the water does. And so this wind blew up, and it blew the veils right off the princesses' faces. They were just held on one side, and the silken veils were now blowing in the wind. And their full beauty was revealed to those Spanish cavaliers who had continued to stand right there in the roadway through this entire thing. The eyes of the princesses and the Spanish cavaliers met, and the Spanish cavaliers fell in love immediately. For you see, back in those days, people fell in love much more quickly than they do now, which, if you read many of the tales that are out there about love, well, it's written in all those books how quickly people then fell in love. Well, the princesses were already in love with those Spanish cavaliers, and So the whole interaction just increased the passion in their hearts. And as they covered their faces again with veils and got onto their horses and rode away, they continued to turn back and look to see if they could catch a glimpse of the cavaliers. And I will tell you that what the guard had said about their nobility and their prowess in battle had done nothing but, well, increase their admiration for those three young men. Well, the three princesses, they took up residence in a tower that was a little bit away from the palace of the Alhambra. But it was connected to that palace via the wall that encircled the Alhambra. And it looked in on one side to, the gardens that were inside the Alhambra. And at the base of this tower were some of the most delicate and beautiful flowers that you could find anywhere in the area. The tower was, of course, beautifully furnished in this kind of light Arabian style. And the apartments were, well, they were described as fairy-like. So not so big, but decorated in such a way that it just brought a magical quality to the whole thing. In the center of this tower, on the marble floor, there was a fountain. And the fountain, was going all day long. So it's, tinkling and trickling could be heard throughout the tower at any time of the day or the night. And in Moorish style, that fountain was in the center of the building. And above, the fountain was just open air in which the rooms of the tower, opened up into this open airway that went from the bottom floor all the way to the ceiling. And it's very typical of architecture where, there's this center area that is open and kind of brings everything together in that center. If you look into Vastu architecture, Stapacheve is known as the Brahmastan, and it's a place where the cosmic forces enter into the building. What a wonderful thing to have, divine or cosmic forces enter into the place where you live or work. Anyway, the princess had everything that they could possibly want within the confines of that tower. But they weren't very happy. Now, when Muhammad had went to get them, the reputation that the princesses had is they were always joyous and singing and doing beautiful artwork and very, very content. And so it was sort of a mystery to Muhammad what had happened to his daughters. He couldn't quite figure it out. And though he had first looked on their melancholy kind of personally, took it personally, he thought about it a little bit, and he thought, they are young women of that age, that marriable age, and their world should be about expansion right now, and maybe I need to, bring into their world more suitable things that they will take interest in. And so Muhammad, being the providing father that he was, he called in jewelers and dressmakers and had the finest of clothing made for the princesses and brought them, all the finest workmen in which they could guide their hands to make the most beautiful jewelry for them and necklaces. But this really did not allay the melancholy that the three princesses were displaying at this point in time. Now, I should tell you that just outside the walls of the Alhambra were the Vermilion Towers. The Vermilion Towers were where the Spanish cavaliers were imprisoned. And during the daytime, they'd go out into the tower, into the ravine. Now, the tower that the princesses lived in looked out on that ravine. And here, the cavaliers were working every day, unbeknownst to the princesses. Now, I will tell you that Muhammad got so, concerned about his daughters that he did something that he normally did not do. He sought counsel. He sought to get the guidance of someone else to figure out what to do. And who should he go to see but Kalisa herself, their duenna? He thought if anybody would know the princesses, it would be her. And so he had a conversation with her in which she praised her attributes and her discretion and asked if she could to please find out what was ailing the princesses. Well, Kalisa readily agreed. And in the most discreet manner, which she was so good at, one day, when she had the three princesses all around her, she asked directly what was bothering them. What could possibly be bothering, the three princesses in a place where they had everything they could possibly want? Well, the princesses looked around kind of blankly at the surroundings in this beautiful hall and, kind of shrugged their shoulders. They'd been around things like that their entire life, and I wasn't doing it. So Kalisa went on, well, should I have brought here the wonderful talking parrot that is the entertainment of so many people? I could have him brought here to keep you all company. Well, Zeta just said, please, no. To have some chattering bird here that only speaks mindless words, mean nothing at all? Oh my gosh, who would have such a bird around as that unless they had no thoughts of their own? Well, said Kalisa, perhaps I should have the wonderful musician brought here that, he's a slave, but is known to have as fine a voice as a woman. Oh, Zoraheda spoke up at this point and said, music? I have no taste for music at all right now. Kalisa, she rubbed her cheeks and said, how about I bring a monkey from Morocco to entertain you? Oh. Zoraheda said, no. This will not do. Neither monkeys nor music. We're beyond all this. Kalisa said, it's too bad that you're beyond music because, the other night as I was walking past the Vermilion Towers, along the wall, I heard the most beautiful music from those three Spanish cavaliers. Oh my. The words that they were singing and the guitar they were playing, I sat spellbound. It was so nice to hear music from my own country. Oh, wow. The princesses took note of this. What is this? Said Kalisa. Do I see a bit of a blush in your faces? Oh my princesses. These three men, they're Christians. They are, they're not of our faith. You should be treating them, you should have no thoughts about them at all. Princesses said, maybe it would be nice to hear their music. We'll leave the story there for today.